Good evening and welcome to the November 27th, 2023 meeting of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. My name is Catherine Halper and I'm Chair of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format, both in person and remote connection. I'll give you a few points on that in a moment. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. I do need to ask if anyone else is recording the meeting. We need to be notified. I'll give you a few seconds in case you're connected remotely. I don't see any hands raised, so we'll go ahead. So pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29th, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL 30A 20, until March 31st, 2025, this meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while it's in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, and the conference ID number is 641-847-57#. You may also join the meeting online using Microsoft Teams through the link that is in the agenda posted on the town website. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, formerly Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and as I mentioned, we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. So let's start with a roll call of board members. Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, present.
Art Spru.
Art Spru, present.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, present.
Charlene Greenhalgh.
Charlene Greenhalgh, present.
And Bob Dubus will not be present this evening. He's notified us. And then is there anyone who needs to recuse themselves from any matters on the agenda this evening? So let's go ahead with the first item on the agenda, which is the minutes from our November 13th meeting. Any amendments, additions, corrections? Yes, Warren.
Yeah, based on the discussions that we had at the time, I think the minutes ought to reflect three things. One, that the number of outdoor seats be restricted to the number requested by the applicant. And that, in addition, the location of bike racks and other items discussed, but mostly the bike racks, be located on the as-built drawings. And that, lastly, that there be an indication on the as-built of the location of the 2 dedicated parking spaces for takeout pickups.
Okay, so this is for 859 Main Street.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
And you want that included in the discussion, those points. We can add those points. Are there any objection to adding those points?
I think they were all agreed to, so that's why
Yeah.
I just mentioned it.
Yeah. So I think Annie has those clearly, so we'll add those 3 points to the formal site plan review for 859 Main Street. Any other additions or corrections? If none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes with the 3 points added?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the November 13 meeting minutes with the amendments as discussed.
Thank you. May I have a second to that motion?
Warren Chain, I second.
Thank you. So Bob Wirtschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Art Spru,
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Charlene Greenhalgh.
Charlene Greenhalgh, approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve. Thank you. And thank you, Annie. Okay, great. Next item on our agenda is satisfaction of conditions, release of conditions for Nellie's Way. Mr. Riley, will you review this matter for us?
Good evening. Bill Riley on behalf of Kristen and Mark Holbrook, who are selling the lot in question, the Little Ancient History. So this was a plan approved back in 2003. And it had a statement of conditions recorded. Now the Holbrooks want to sell their property, and of course, the statement was never released. So in order for them to accomplish the sale, we have to get a release of the statement of conditions. So of the conditions, lots 3, 4, and 5 shall be subject to a covenant. And there was a road covenant recorded, and a discharge of that covenant also recorded. Lots 3, 4, and 5 shall be served by town water, and I can tell the board that all the lots are served by town water. The next condition, existing structures. I don't know if you guys were here when the Ridgevale Motel was here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember it.
okay, so the structures they're referring to was the Ridgevale Motel, because it's a subdivision of the Ridgevale Motel property. And all the structures that were on these lots have been removed. And then the 2-year maintenance agreement is a mystery. We don't know if there was one,
But it's,
but the 2 years
is
is long
gone.
gone by, so
Yes. Okay.
Katie might have something to offer for that.
Yes, Kate, yes, please go ahead.
If I could, so I went through the file, and there was a maintenance agreement referred to in the bond release, and so I think that this is just a housekeeping item. I think
Yes.
that when they released the bond back in 2007, they should have released the statement of conditions at that time, and I think that that was just an oversight.
An oversight, yes. All right. Thank you. Any questions from the board? Any comments? So may I have a motion that we release the statement of conditions, that we approve the release of the statement of conditions?
Madam Chair, I so move.
And may I have a second to that motion?
I second.
Bob Wirtschafter,
I approve.
Art Spru,
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Charlene Greenhalgh,
Charlene Greenhalgh, approve.
and this is Catherine Halpin. I also approve. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Thank you very much. When can I get that, you know?
We can have it this week. We can have it ready this week.
Oh, great, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank
The
you.
Holbrooks will appreciate it, too.
Okay, good. The next item on the agenda is the modification of definitive subdivision plan, but this item is postponed. We are scheduled to hold a meeting on December 18th to attend to this matter. I don't know that we need to take a formal vote to continue it. It's just been postponed to December 18th meeting. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so the next item on our agenda is again a request for comment and recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals regarding a driveway in the Conservancy District for 9 Scallop Terrace. And could you introduce yourself, please, to the board? Thank you so much.
Yep, I'm Donnie Dunham of DeMartin Dunham Builders. We also have Asa Mintz from AJM Site Design on Zoom as well. Asa is going to give a brief description of the driveway.
Okay.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes, please go ahead.
Asa Mintz, AJM Site Design for the record. This is a raise and replace of an existing dwelling with an almost near exact footprint of the existing dwelling. We are, as part of this, we're making this building flood compliant. So the first living floor will essentially be on what would appear to be the second floor. And we'll have, flood venting and everything. As part of this, this will incorporate a sort of a drive under garage configuration. So we've got an existing shell area or shell driveway to the right, as you're looking at the building to the right of it. We're going to retain that shell area to the property line. That driveway, which fits about 4 cars, is about 500 square feet. And the drive under, parking area, or I should say driveway that accesses the garage, the garage underneath, will be in about an additional 201 square feet to the property line. As you know, the parking in this area is somewhat difficult. So this certainly should help that a little bit by retaining the existing parking area and providing some underground or, first level garage capacity. So, we're adding a little bit of driveway, but we're actually, if you look at the hardscape on the land coverage chart, under the hardscape line, we're actually removing quite a bit of hardscape that actually crosses over into the right of way. So that will come out as part of this, and in that same area is where the driveway will be installed. No aprons or anything here. It's all just shell driveways from the edge of the pavement up to the dwelling itself. And basically the footprint of the existing parking area will remain. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Any questions from the board to begin?
Yeah, well, if I look at the artist drawing of the house, sure looks like it's stone, a stone or brick driveway and not a shell driveway. So,
In the rendering, you're saying?
yes,
It's intended to be a shell driveway.
okay, but it's not in the drawing, so let's,
Annie, can you expand the drawing or? Yeah, that's
It does
intended
look-
to be seashells.
okay.
Yep.
Yes, it does look like stone, you're right.
It does say so on the site
Site
plan as
plans.
well. that
I
it's
just
shell.
want to make sure that
It's
we're
fair.
consistent here because they're showing.
I thought it was shells.
That would be my first concern, and that being said, I'm pretty sure that we should be cutting out 200 square feet of the parking on the side and leaving you with the same amount of parking as you had before.
I'd like to make a comment, if I might. Strictly speaking, the bylaw states that when the planning board's only consideration is to make a recommendation to the ZBA, either positive or negative, about whether or not this complies with our bylaw for the for driveways in the Conservancy District. And strictly speaking, it says where there is no other means of access. So strictly speaking, the bylaw allows for only one means of access. Strictly speaking, that means you need to eliminate the existing parking area entirely. There should only be one means of access, even though it's shell. In all cases, it has to be pervious material that allows for the unobstructed flow of water in addition. So that's a strict application of the bylaw, and I'll invite other comments from the board.
Can I ask one question or?
Sure.
Just because we're actually working on 2 or 3 other homes in the area, same circumstance. So the access point for the driveway to drive under is actually not enough depth to the property line to park a car. So it's essentially just to get underneath the house. And in the
Okay,
other
that's
cases
fine.
that we've been to the board about, especially on Clamshell Drive, same circumstance, we kept in what we called an existing parking area to remain in the driveway is only where the garage is. So maybe I'm
But there
just,
might have been only one point of access. I mean, I don't, without
Sure.
going back to those files and seeing how we
Understood.
evaluated that,
yeah,
the bylaw's pretty clear that there should be allows only one. It says where there is no other reasonable means of access, it allows for driveways in the Conservancy District. So strictly speaking, this is 2 means of access, so I'm just bringing that up to the board
okay,
for consideration. And remember, we're sending a recommendation to the
Understood.
Zoning Board of Appeals about, they want our opinion about it.
Yep,
Right,
thank you.
Arthur? Sure.
Yes, I went out and looked at the site, and there's, as the applicant has stated, there's a fair amount of hardscape area that's in the front. This is a positive, upgrade associated with that because they were removing all of that hardscape. Normally, I would say we should try to deal with the requirements of the bylaw literally to the nth degree. There is a proposed approach in here that actually benefits. So even though it's not something that I would support to be happening on a regular basis, because there is a benefit from this. They are sticking with just a pervious shell driveway. I agree, you really can't put any cars and park them in there. It's just for access underneath. I would be okay in this instance, but I'll defer to the board if they would like to have some other adjustments.
Other comments from the board or questions?
This is Warren Chain. I think I'd support Art's view of this.
Okay,
I think that to the extent that anything is done to the existing shell parking area, it ought to be as little as possible, and it ought to be as pervious as possible. But it does seem to me that eliminating that doesn't solve any problems. It creates additional problems, because I'd also
Okay.
agree, having been out there, that this driveway is nothing that you can park a car in, because the house is being built on the road, as best as I can tell.
okay.
Pretty close. So I would be in favor of that. I do have one question, and that is, the plot plan here shows, a very odd, for me anyway, odd piece of lot 177 to the northwest of the property, which is quite a long ways, and I can't read the numbers, they're too small. And I'm curious as to whether the area of that appendage is included in the total lot for calculating lot coverage of the proposed building.
It's not. So that's an easement for the neighborhood for, and Asa, correct me if I'm wrong, for a shared leaching area in lot 177 that services all of the Scallop houses. So each house pumps to lot 177.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that is part of a larger conglomerate of the remainder of the properties there. The septic system actually encompasses more than just that one piece where it says lots 177. That long necked area is actually just where the force main from the pump chamber runs down the backyard, and is essentially access. It is property, it's not an easement, but it is just essentially access to the rear of the adjacent house, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Charlene? No?
I,
Okay.
I agree with what Art and Warren said.
Okay, good.
I'm willing to go along with that, but I want it explicitly denoted where the hardscape is being removed, to make sure it's at least as big as the new driveway.
Yeah, that's an appropriate, we can probably put that in the,
In our
in a
recommendation.
recommendation, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Annie, did you get that? We want to include that in our recommendation, but I'm hearing from the board that we want to give a positive recommendation. So may I have a motion to that effect, a positive recommendation with the additional notes as stated regarding the square footage of the hardscape being removed?
Art Spru, I'll make that motion, and to clarify, we also will clearly define it as a shell driveway
Yes,
to the existing grade.
yes.
Yeah.
We should always include our standard sentence that the driveway is made of pervious material and allows for the unobstructed flow of water. Okay,
I would second that motion.
okay.
Go ahead.
Bob Forshafter?
Charlene did. Oh, yes, I approve.
Okay. Art Spru?
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain?
Warren Chain, approve.
Charlene Greenhalgh?
Charlene Greenhalgh.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, next item, oh dear, I lost my, next item on the agenda is long-range planning. We again want to have a discussion about the West Chatham Neighborhood Center District zoning. There's a number of issues to discuss. I think what we want to start out with is, you did receive in your packet responses from town council to our questions regarding year-round occupancy, and also allowing for certain things like the density bonus incentive being offered by special permit, and so on. I won't read it. I'll presume that all of you have studied this carefully. I think I'll put this out, and maybe we need to discuss as a board that we got some very thorough answers from town council, and positive answers that, yes, we can do these things. However, I hope you understand that this is going to require a bit of work to actually craft the language, to comply with town council's advice, to incorporate that language into the bylaw. As our usual procedure is, usually staff in some manner or another drafts some language, we review it, there might be some need for conversations back and forth, and then the final draft for the language that addresses these points would again need to be reviewed by town council. So that's our usual procedure. In my opinion, these points are of the utmost importance to the bylaw. They're not something we can omit, and it's not something that's a quick fix that can just be added. It needs some time and attention. I don't know that we can expect that it'll be done by the December 11th meeting or even by the January meetings. But I would encourage you and recommend that we go forward with this. Katie, did you have anything to add to those comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, I reviewed the proposed bylaw today in anticipation of staff having to craft some language and trying to determine, where we would input such language. I think we would want, as staff, we would want to look at, some other communities, looking at different criteria that other communities have utilized. And again, as Catherine stated, we can certainly get to work on this as soon as possible. I just don't know how long. I can't put a timeline on it specifically for tonight's meeting to give you an answer about when we could come back with draft language. Because it is specific and it's something that's somewhat new, I think it's going to take us a little while to potentially even find locations and communities that might have adopted criteria related to housing and density bonuses. But we'll certainly, start that effort as soon as possible.
Charlene.
That was going to be my exact suggestion, is that you reach out to other communities through the Mass Planners listserv. That's a great resource, and I think you may find a few examples. Not that it's Massachusetts, but I think several communities in Vermont as well have density bonus language that, as I recall, is pretty darn good and definitely could be tailored to fit Massachusetts. But I think all certainly is not lost. I think there's some examples out there that will be available.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yes, please.
And I'll certainly reach out to the Cape Cod Commission. Staff will have a conversation with them. I think that, a lot of work that they did with their regional housing strategy recently, that, again, they may have information that they can provide to us. So I think that that's a good place to start, too.
Yeah, good. Other comments,
Yeah.
Board Chef?
I have a concern with 3.3 and just the sentence that says year-round dwelling unit defined as a dwelling unit occupied or rented for those are not the same thing. And we mean occupied, we do not mean rented. So if it has to say occupied or rented, then I don't think it works.
Well, that's provided that you put in the other piece, which says that it has to be rented for a specific, an extended period of time. I think the other two items under 1 and 2 sort of imply that too, that it needs to be a year-round occupancy.
Yes.
Right. But it could be a rented year-round occupancy.
Yes.
Okay, so in other words, the language is very important, is what you're saying, how it's worded.
Yeah,
Got
it
it.
needs to be occupied.
Yep.
12 months.
Yep.
Whether it's rented or owned is immaterial.
Yep.
Really.
And I think that kind of language can easily be inserted. That we.
I just objected to the
Yes.
definition there that made it ambiguous.
Okay.
Well,
Yes,
the-
Arthur, go ahead.
All right,
And then-
thank you. I think the first 2 points that were here are major items that we were trying to drive for months and months in here. And I think that this tells me at least, if we craft this right, we should be able to pass the Attorney General's review on it, which to me would have been real critical here, because this is not something that every community has been doing, but it's something that we think is very important for Chatham. So I think the language has to, you got to do what you can and get review probably from town council even, again, as a second one after we get a first draft of it. One of the things that I was wondering, with the special permit granting, should there be a listing of criteria that we would also include in this? Because this is not your average special conditions that are used for all the other type of special permit type.
Yes,
So that's something that we would want to have too, right?
yes. Yes, and I think town council does mention that, and I think definitely that, again, requires some work from us and from staff to define those criteria. Katie, did you want to comment?
And just to be consistent with the rest of the bylaw, all of the special permit requirements, even where the planning board is the special permit granting authority, they lay out their specific criteria, and I think we want to be consistent with the bylaws, with the bylaw as it's written as well. So I think that that's very important.
Yeah, so again, that's going to involve some work and
Right.
thought, yeah.
So I think that that's going to be important to flesh that piece out. This just emphasized more and more with the amount of time that our board has put into this, to having the special permit granting authority being the planning board for this West Chatham Neighborhood Center. It just, to me, it's a critical piece to make sure that when an application comes before us, especially if it's a multi-dwelling mixed use, it's going to be so important that we get this right. I would not want to be battling back and forth with trying to define where an applicant should go associated with this, and one source being a planning board for this particular bylaw makes a lot of sense. It's been my experience that the planning board can and should, in certain applications like this, be the special permit granting authority because of the type of mixed uses that could actually be before our board.
Yeah. I just want to say I agree with you, Art. I think this just reiterates and confirms that in these cases, the planning board is the more appropriate agency to be the special permit granting authority, because basically what we're evaluating when a project would come before us, using the special permit criteria that we'll be drafting, is whether or not that project fulfills the purpose of the bylaw. And I think the body, the board that is most familiar with the intent and purpose of the bylaw is more qualified to evaluate that.
One other thing, I know that this, you may not be able to make the December 11th meeting, but we do have one on the 18th, and I was wondering, would the board be, if you had information available that could be shared for the 18th, would the board be open to actually reviewing it on the 18th? I know we wanted to reserve it to the one issue for the subdivision, but I would be open if we were going to be here and there was enough work done on it by the staff. Could we?
That was
This is more for the board members as well as Katie.
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
So if I may, Madam Chair, so I would suggest that, that certainly is a possibility. I think it would certainly give staff more time. I'm not sure how much we'll have, but that's certainly a possibility. I also wanted to mention that the only other item on the agenda for the December 11th meeting is another driveway in a conservancy district, and that applicant has actually asked to be heard on the 18th as opposed to on the 11th. And so if we were to do that, we could actually, if we don't have any other items, if we're not discussing long-range planning, you could actually cancel your December 11th meeting if you so chose.
Yeah, and just do December 18th. So I'm seeing everybody nod their heads, so we'll do that. But that being said, I just want to, we need to exercise some caution. It may not be enough time to thoroughly process this.
No, I understand.
Yeah, and, you know, I did sort of at least try to imply it when we discussed at our last meeting, but there's a possibility that we might need to, we can evaluate in January how this looks. But we do need to evaluate how strongly the public understands it. We may not even get the final version till January, maybe not even in January. So we do need to evaluate whether we should go ahead for 2024 or whether we might be better to delay until 2025. I know no one wants to do that, but, and in some sense, there's not a risk of going ahead in 2024. If it doesn't pass, we can introduce it again in 2025. I don't think we lose anything, but I think we do, it's better to go ahead with some assurance that there's enough understanding and acceptance by the public and other boards and committees that it will go ahead successfully. With that in mind, we've talked a bit about a couple of things. One is getting some visuals done that illustrate, that clearly show the public and clear, you know, what this could look like. Also, we've talked about updating the build-out analysis. We have the build-out analysis from the 2014 study that was done by Cape Cod Commission. That was based on a baseline density of 4 units per acre. We've now increased that baseline density to 5 units per acre. I don't think it's a huge increase, but nevertheless, it could be useful and helpful for the public's understanding and acceptance to get an updated build-out analysis with the new density levels that we're proposing, and then have some visuals done based on that build-out analysis. If we take that route, we will likely need to engage, I know Art and Ryan have worked on an informal build-out analysis, but we'd likely need to engage outside consultants such as Cape Cod Commission or other people, and then we are definitely looking at a situation where we won't have those materials till sometime next year. We won't have them in December. I don't think we would have them in January. So if we feel those are helpful and necessary to really inform the public about this, then we are looking at a more extended timeline. So I do want to ask the board, how do you feel about doing an updated build-out analysis and visuals? And/or visuals? Yes, Charlene?
I think the visuals are absolutely important. And, you know, no one knows what it's going to look like in 30 years.
That's true.
You know, if we had that crystal ball, holy cow, you know. But we just can't do that. But we can give a representation of what it could look like.
Right.
And also, I think, I keep buzzing. I think comparisons, I got thinking about after the last meeting, taking a similar land area, like in the old village or a very dense area, and just, you know, use a similar acreage and see what's the density in there, just to kind of give a comparison. I think you're going to find it's significantly higher in the
Right.
old village.
Yes.
But I think that is important. And I think the build-out analysis, you know, I think it will be helpful, but you never get to that build-out.
Yes.
I mean,
Correct,
it
yeah.
does not happen. Not everybody who builds a house is going to want to build a 5-bedroom house in a neighborhood where they can. So, I mean, it's a maximum of what could possibly happen.
Correct.
But the theoretical, you know, that it ever happens is really few and far between.
Correct. And also, again, as many of you have brought up, we're looking at an area where right now there's viable businesses in place. the buildings that are in place are in reasonably good condition. I mean, we might not anticipate any redevelopment in those areas for a good length of time, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. But nevertheless, I think what the board's intention is to put in place zoning that is in the long-term best interests of the town and that can create an attractive, livable village center in West Chatham. And I think that's still something that we need to do. Yeah. Warren?
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of the visual presentations and spending some money to be able to have something to show people
Yeah.
as to what the long-range objective here is. I think it can't be understated how important that is. With respect to the build-out, my gut tells me that it's spending a lot of money for very little value add, but it may be essential. As part of that, I think it might be helpful if we could guesstimate based on buildings in place today and available building lots, really how many building units or housing units could be built on the available land. Because I don't think it's a whole lot.
Right?
So one way to
That's
look at
correct.
the build-out analysis is to say the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, based on today's build-out, could reasonably generate X number of housing units. And it's not a big number. And that would be another way to take a look at a build-out analysis, to put it in perspective. But I certainly would support it if it costs money, if it's deemed essential. But what I've heard from, Health Department and/or, not sure who,
Dr.
I've seen
Duncanson?
comments to say they didn't think that the going from 4 to 5 is going to be an issue. But you can't just say that because you have no real basis to say it. So I think that it could be important. We've had significant pushback consistently on the point of available water, sewer, et cetera, and I think that that's a very legitimate concern by those who have raised it, and you need to have a way to address that in a way that would be understood by the voters. So I guess I'm in favor of it. But I'd also like to see somebody take a swag at how many houses are likely to, or housing units are likely to be built out on the West Chatham neighborhood lots, taking a look at geography, topography,
Yeah.
existing buildings, access, setbacks, and so on. Because I just don't think it's a big number, but I don't know how many that is
Yeah.
either, so.
Well, that's what a build-out analysis would tell us. And I did want to make a distinction. There's the infrastructure analysis and the build-out analysis. And the infrastructure analysis would, and the visuals ideally would be based on the build-out analysis. And I think what you might be remembering, Warren, is, because I remember it too, Dr. Duncanson some time back gave us an infrastructure analysis, water, sewage, all those things. And he said, but that was, again, based on the previous density of 4 units per acre. And he said there's no issue. And I don't remember his exact words. We can go back to the tape. But he said, you've got a lot of leeway. So he definitely, based on what he said, which was, that we had more than enough to accommodate the density of 4 units per acre, I would anticipate that 5 units per acre is not a problem, but it's always good to just reiterate
We
it.
anticipate the answer, but.
Yeah. But we need it, yeah,
It's not the basis to have voters support it, so.
correct.
So reluctantly, I'd be in favor of spending money on that as well as the visual presentations.
Yeah, I think this is more about, maybe a little less for us, but it is more about presenting this to the community so that people really understand what's involved, what it might look like, what the build-out would look like, what the infrastructure situation is exactly, and visuals that go along with that. So this is more about public outreach. And some of these considerations. I think we've been talking about it because we've been working on this bylaw, as we keep saying, for a long time. We were initially planning to put it forth before the 2016 annual town meeting, along with the South Chatham Neighborhood Center, but decided not to go ahead because we didn't want to put too many things before the voters in one meeting. Then after that, it got delayed for a number of reasons. The ADU bylaw was one reason, COVID was another reason. So we haven't worked on it for all those years since then, but it's been in process for some time. That being said, I think we're very close to the finish line, but there are some key issues that need to be resolved, and we also need to present it. The public needs to understand it. So that's why I'm bringing up the idea of a build-out done by maybe now it's like Cape Cod Commission, and refreshing the infrastructure analysis and visuals based on the build-out analysis. That being said, that does very likely give us a longer timeline, and we don't like to say this, but it might mean going before 2025 rather than 2024. In my personal opinion, we've put so much time and effort into this already, that to do the final stroke strongly and solidly makes a lot of sense. And it's not going to be that much difference. Like we've said, we're not looking at a situation where there's going to be building immediately, probably, or redevelopment immediately. So I just want to throw that out there. If we could get it before 2024, we should still do that, no question. I'm getting the sense that the board is in favor of refreshing a build-out analysis and doing visuals and spending money to do that. Am I incorrect in that judgment? Yeah.
I was just gonna get some reasonable idea of timing.
Yeah.
I mean, are we talking about 2 months, or are we talking about, more than that? Because I think it's important, but I don't think it needs to be a perfect big study. I think it just needs to be something that, do we know who would do this? And if we do, then we tell them we need something in 3 weeks. That's all you got to do. You can't spend a lot of money, and you can't just get us something in 3 weeks. That would be my preference, to try and structure it that way, so that we have everything. Because I frankly am ready to let this go, because there are other things that we need to do, and we
That's also
don't do
true.
a very good job of doing more than one big focus thing at a time. So my hope is that we can finish this, my preference would be we don't delay it, and we get whatever drawings and study we can in time so it isn't delayed, as opposed to set up a structure where we're going to study it and that could push the thing to the next year. I would rather not do that.
Okay. Katie, did you want to comment?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I would like to be able to reach out to the Cape Cod Commission to talk with them about what it would take for them to update the build-out analysis that they did previously, and maybe get some idea of A, price, B, timeline, and bring that back to the board for consideration, and see, we can make a determination from that point in time. If we need to hire a consultant, that's going to be a different route that we'll need to take, and we'll need to look at, what that potential cost may be. So the other thing I wanted to mention, we've already reached out to a consultant to talk about some visuals, and they had indicated to us that they could have something done potentially by the end of January. So that was their timeline. So as much as I agree with you, Mr. Wirtschafter, I also understand that a lot of the consultants are just pushing back on timelines and such. And so we need to be realistic that if we want something, we may need to wait. So I think it's up to the board to make a determination about whether or not they want it. And, I think I can bring at least information back from the Cape Cod Commission, hopefully on the December 18th meeting, to say whether or not they have, A, the capacity, B, willing to do it, and see, what works for them from a timeline and cost standpoint. And we
Right.
can
Can
go
we
from
just
there.
give you the authority to make a decision on that if it's favorable, rather than wait 3 weeks for us to say yes? I'm happy to let you go forward if they're willing to do it and able to do it. I don't think you have to come back to us, because we don't have budgets and any of that anyway.
Right, and that's fine by me. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a matter of, I'd have a conversation with the town manager. But, there's definitely some money in the community development budget that we can utilize. That's what we were going to use for the visuals. So if there's additional funds, depending on what the commission says, I'll update you at the meeting on December 18th about where we are.
Okay, for the build-out and the visuals. Yeah, that sounds great, yeah. So we've got three things. We've got the build-out, the visuals, and then we've got the language that we need to add based on town council's response and the special permit criteria. So that also involves some work, but yeah, that's great. Great. Yes, Arthur?
Yes, I think you were, it's a good idea what you had, Bob, about not necessarily drilling down into the nitty-gritties on this, because it was something I became aware of when I started looking into this a little bit. When you take a look at the criteria that's in the draft, you can't just take a parcel and say, oh, okay, let's just take this and multiply it by this and you get that. Well, you can, but if you look closely at it, what can someone develop? Well, the way it's structured, it says 40% has to be landscaped or some other amenities. That means only 60%. And then what about upland versus conservation and all of that? It can get rather onerous. And I'm thinking, or I'm suggesting that we don't go there. I'm not quite sure it's going to be help or beneficial. Many of the times when you do these analyses, you don't get into the nitty-gritties like that. In my opinion, I don't think we're going to need to on this. I think if you go through a first pass on this with the commission, I think that we'll find out that we're going to be fine. So, and I think it's because there are enough clear items to say you're not going to be doing something here because of, say, the RPZ. You're not going to be doing something there because it's conservation, because there's a fair amount of conservation here too. You start to eliminate those pieces, and all of a sudden, you no longer have, even if you're trying to say, well, there's an average of 5 across all 37 acres. Well, it's not, because you don't have anywhere near that. And I think if we take a little higher level without drilling down too far, get this across that there are going to be even further restrictions to say we couldn't even get here if we want to. And I think that after my first look at this told me that without drilling down further, so I'm suggesting that in your discussions with the commission, Cape Cod Commission, that I don't think we're going to need to drill down that far. And I'm not quite sure how far they do their analysis. Everybody does it in a different way. But the West Chatham Neighborhood Center has enough eliminations in it that once you start averaging it out amongst the entire 37 acres, you find that we're going to be right where that number is as far as what the estimate was
Yeah,
in the
2014.
in the 2014 analysis.
I was just thinking while you were talking, so 2014, the basic assumption, as I recall, was 4 units per acre.
Yeah.
The RPZ was not a consideration in 2014.
That's right.
So that's another issue. Now we're saying our baseline density is 5 units per acre, and then we're offering this density bonus situation. So that density bonus situation was not part of 2014. But then again, RPZ was also not part of 2014. So I think if it is possible, if Cape Cod Commissioners uses the 2014 analysis as their basis with some revisions, that it might not be such a lengthy task to complete the build-out analysis under the current, the current densities that we're proposing. So
The reason I'm suggesting this is if we can
possible.
show some information sufficiently, say in January, I'm agreeing with you, Bob. I'd like to move ahead with this as much as we can. And if we're able to address what the attorney has advised us on here, and we have some information on this build-out that these are the two biggest items that we had, I'm suggesting that this is something that we should continue to pursue and see if we can get it on for the 2024 Maytown meeting. And if we get close to the meeting and we don't think that we're there, then we can always, on town floor, we can say we want to indefinitely postpone it.
And the drawings are not critical to us moving forward. They're critical to have at some point when,
Correct.
in March perhaps,
Yeah.
when we're trying to sell it.
That's correct.
So I think that you've identified the two things that we need to do right now.
I think we're
Katie, go
hoping
ahead,
to have the visuals for the public hearing. I think
Yeah.
that was our hope. I think that we thought that that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I think for public understanding and support, the visuals are really important. And those visuals would take into account the build-out analysis and also HBDC design standards, which the planning board has adopted as our design standards and which will apply apply to this district. And so I do think it will be helpful for the public to understand this and embrace it. Very helpful. The visuals are essential for that. So, yeah, Katie, did you have another comment? Great, so I think the board is basically giving you the go-ahead. Oh,
I never
Warren,
had my 2
yes.
cents here yet.
Yes, 2 cents, please.
I do think one other thing that we need to focus on how we're going to get resources on is the development, as Bob, I believe, mentioned, of the criteria that the board would be using for assessing special permit
Permits,
applications.
yeah.
Because I think that's really critical. It's not going to be easy to come up with the final list, even if, so I would just mention that. And a couple of other things which paragraph 3 was brought up as needing some work on the drafting, which I would agree with. While I have certainly drafted what I think would work, I'm not going to share it with everybody because it'll take some time. But rather only to say that as written, I read it as saying an owner who happens to live in Naples, Florida for tax reasons can't do that because he's not a year-round occupant. You need to somehow define this, that if you happen to own a house and are saving it or as an investment for the future to retire to or to use for a couple of months in the summer, that you can do that. I mean, no problem with that. But you cannot rent it for less than 6 months, and I would say, with respect to that, it ought to be 6 months plus 2 days, because you want to make sure that it's over 180 days, which would mean whoever rented it, could be a resident of the town and vote. And it means that whoever owns it is not an occupant for over 6 months and therefore is not able to vote in the town. I mean, it's, I think, a meaningful distinction for a couple of days. So that's something to think about as things are drafted. And that lastly, we had at some point decided that our prohibition of single-family homes in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center was further than we needed to go, and that if you want to have more than a single house and you had multiple houses in a cottage kind of a colony kind of a thing, that should not be prohibited. I'm not sure exactly what the final draft is actually going to say about that, But I think that whatever the restrictions are imposed on year-round occupancy, and the objective in prohibiting short-term rentals, really less than 182 or 6 months plus 2 days, that it ought to apply to all dwelling units that are approved within the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, be they cottage colonies, single-family, in other words, or multi-unit, multifamily. And it ought, whatever we draft, ought to apply to all the units, not just excluding single-family cottage units, because then we're just developing a proposal to incentivize people to build small single-family cottages, which is also not our objective. So at any rate, that's my final thought for the day. Thank you.
I think it's the intention it would apply to all dwelling units, and I think we need to make a distinction. I think the distinction we made was we are prohibiting one single-family home on one lot, and that we understand that separate units on one lot that are like they're not called single-family homes, it's more like detached townhouses.
No, I didn't mean
or
to-
a cottage colony.
We don't
So
have the wording. I just wanted to highlight that
Yeah.
the understanding of the board is
Yes,
that
we're allowing
whatever the
that.
word is, a dwelling unit would be single family, or any dwelling unit that is approved and built in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center would have the same restrictions on it.
Yeah, I think that's what everyone
And
intends.
just wanted to make sure that that was front of mind while somebody is drafting.
Okay, good. Yes.
We can't stop somebody. I think the distinction is new units. I mean, if somebody lives there now in their house, we can't stop them from renting their house, just.
No, we're only talking about new
New
developments.
units. Yeah, new units.
Yeah, well, that's,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
No,
that
no,
we had
absolutely.
New units.
absolutely.
Any other, I think we've charted a course forward, yeah, and, yeah, Katie, did you want to make a comment, or, no? Yeah,
I was just going to ask if you wanted to take public comment.
oh, yeah, I'll just see, is there any more discussion from the board about West Chatham Neighborhood Center? I think we've charted a course forward. Katie will let us know, or staff will let us know, on the 18th about the situation with getting an updated build-out analysis from Cape Cod Commission and visuals through perhaps another consultant. And we'll continue with this discussion at that time on the 18th. We've canceled the meeting for the 11th. I think we've charted a course forward. We still want to, I'm hearing from the board that we still want to look at getting to 2024 if we can, which I think everyone agrees with. So any other comments from the board before I ask for public comment? Yes, Charlene?
Just one brief thing as a planner for my whole professional career. Having the planning board be both the special permit granting authority and the site plan approval granting authority just streamlines the process for the applicant as well.
Yeah,
There's nothing worse than having to go here, there, you know, if it streamlines that part of the permitting process, it's a bonus.
yeah, good, thank you. Any other comments from the board? So I will ask for public comment on West Chatham Neighborhood Center discussions at this time. Anyone present? I do see a hand raised. It looks like guest.
Guest, yes.
Yes, it's Elaine Gibbs. With respect to the Cape Cod Commission's build-out analysis, I think what you have to take into consideration, with respect to the Buckley property, I know that you've excluded it from the district. I assume you excluded it because it could be 40B housing or something else. But my concern is that just by virtue of its location, it is part of the neighborhood. And the people who live there will be driving in the neighborhood, they will be walking in the neighborhood, and the number of units will impact water and sewer and density and traffic. Gloria McPherson's made presentations, I don't know if you've heard them, You know, they're looking at anywhere between 25 and 50 units. That would be anywhere between 50 and 100 bedrooms, 100 cars. They're all going to impact that corridor. So if you don't include that in the analysis is going to be immaterial in terms of density, because they will have a very real impact on the density of that corridor, regardless of whether you say it's within the district or not. It should be, in my view, it should be in the district because it's arbitrarily cut out. It ends closer to downtown than the north side. So that's your call, but I'm just telling you that's going to be a problem down the road when people will say, well, this study didn't tell us anything because you're not counting those 100 bedrooms in terms of water and sewer use and traffic. So those are my only comments. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Elaine. I'm just going to make a comment, just a reminder that also the impact on water and sewer is considered on a site-by-site basis. So we can do that consideration vis-a-vis the zoning for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, but on a project-by-project basis, that impact is considered as part of the issuing of building permits, as I understand it. So that will also be reviewed in that context, just to comment there. Any other comments from the public or questions from anyone? That being said, yes, KM, I can't quite read the name underneath.
It's Carolyn McClellan.
Carolyn, yes, please go ahead.
Hello, all. I just wanted to thank the board for all the hard work you do. And I know this is a complicated process and it's a big unknown. And I just want to acknowledge all the work that you're doing and how much I appreciate the effort that you're making. And you're doing great work. And I just wanted to thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public before we go to our adjournment? Then may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move we adjourn this meeting, Madam Chair.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I second. I'm Bob, seconds.
Bob Wertschafter.
Say yes, Bob.
I said yes, I second.
And
Bob Wertschafter, yes.
Now vote.
Again.
Art Spru.
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approve.
Charlene Greenhouse.
Charlene Greenhalgh, approve.
This is Catherine Halper, and I also approve that we adjourn the meeting. And let's note the time as, looks like 6:02 in the evening. Yes, thank you, everybody, for participating, and please enjoy the rest of the evening.